existing debt service plus the new debt service and the system reinvestment funding. So the rate strategy we've put together is, first kind of a reiteration of what the major cost drivers are, and the need for the rate increase is the elimination of the use of the system development charges to pay debt service. The new debt service required to fund the capital program, and again the phase-in policy for system reinvestment. So to make up that shortfall, cover that gap, and pay all those pay the expenditures, it's about 2 years of 13.5% increases, followed by 3 years of 13% increases over the rate study period. This strategy does include also continuing to use some cash reserves to draw down the cash reserves to help smooth those rates over time. So we're looking at a series of about 13% increases a year for the water utility. What you can see there is bar graphs are the same, with the exception the dotted line now shows what the annual revenues would be under this proposed rate strategy, showing that you would be, gradually moving up to covering your full cost by the end of the study period. In the interim years where you see those bar charts coming up over the top of that dotted line, that's where that indicates the use of available cash reserves to help smooth those rates. So that is the overall look at the water utilities financial situation from a current practice situation. So the next thing that we needed to discuss is the implications of the recent Supreme Court ruling on Lane versus Seattle on the recovery of fire protection costs. So municipal water utilities can no longer include the cost of fire protection in their water rates. It's considered a general fund obligation needed to be paid for from general fund resources. A couple of options that are out there for recovering the costs is either a direct payment from the general fund, and the city's approach for 2010 was they did budget the hydrant maintenance cost in the general fund for 2010 as opposed to the water utility fund, and that was about $50,000. So that was the 2010 approach to start addressing the issue. The other alternative and commonly used approach is an increase to the water utility tax. This is the approach we're proposing for 2011 forward. Essentially, it's been ruled appropriate that you need to recover fire protection costs, can't be in the actual rates themselves, but they can be recovered through an increase in the water utility tax. So we're looking at recovering all the fire protection related costs, those things like your hydrants, pipe oversizing for fire, reservoir fire suppression needs, etc. So what this means in terms of traditional rate making is that it's really a more detailed cost to service analysis view of the fire protection costs on a system, where we're now viewing fire protection services as incremental to your domestic water service. And so you're really saying to provide domestic water, potable water to your customers, you do need a certain amount of infrastructure and costs, et cetera. And then looking at fire is just what's the increment in cost for having the fire, going through a detailed analysis and calculating what the fire is, removing it from rates. The result of that is the impact of the fire cost removal is that for the city's water system, the total fire protection costs added up to about $162,500. That's about 6.4% of the total water utility costs. The new incremental tax then for that would be the city's current tax is 10%. The incremental tax to recover the fire costs would be 6.4% for a total water utility tax of 16.4. So what this is showing is the legal requirement of removing fire protection would be met. The approach of recovering costs from the utility tax then results in no impact to the actual customer bill to remove the fire, and then the customers would be paying the increment of the 13.5% that we discussed as the overall need for the water system, which is not related to the fire cost removal task, but just to get the revenues at the level needed. With the table here, I don't want to walk through all the steps, but essentially what the first column of the table shows you, these are your revenues at your current rates. Then you go through and you increase them at 13.5%. These are the new revenues that you need, showing that everyone gets a 13.5 kind of system-wide increase. You remove the fire from rates. You put it back in from a reallocation of utility taxes, and you end up with essentially the same impact to the customers, but just demonstrating you have taken fire out of your water rates and recovered it from the general fund sources. We don't have to read all these numbers on this chart. This is here for information. This is essentially taking what your existing rate structure is now. The first column shows your existing rates for the different types of customers and meter sizes, and then the next three columns to show what the rate increases would be over the next 3 years at the 13.5 for the next 3 years. As we had shown on the slide previously, we showed 5 years of rate increase strategy. And this chart here shows 3 years. I believe the recommendation is going to be to adopt 5 years of rates. And so the last 2 years of rates would again just be the additional 13% in each of those last 2 years. Moving into sewer, essentially looking at the same type of process for sewer. Again, the capital projects for sewer over the study period are about $28.2 million. The main project there you can see in 2013 is the Phase 3 treatment improvement costs for that substantial increase there. And in the last year, it is Stiles Road Interceptor Pump Station Force Main number 13. Again, looking at the funding plan for sewer. A lot less cash available in the sewer utility, a much larger capital improvement program for the sewer utility, so about 6% is coming from available cash, and the remaining 94% would be required to be debt financed over the study period. Looking at the operating forecast, again, the bottom bars being the annual operating expenditures, which are increasing with inflation, the green bar being existing debt service, the purple bar being the new debt service. So you can see that's really where the key driver is in the rate increase needs is to pay the debt service on that $28 million capital program, and the top chart being the rate-funded system reinvestment. So you can see that the rate-funded system reinvestment for sewer is a pretty small amount because we tried to mitigate the near-term increases, and this is why we phased in sewer over a much longer process than we did for the water utility. Looking at the rate structure strategy, kind of the cost drivers, is historically the annual revenues have not been sufficient to pay the annual expenditures of the utility, and cash reserves have been used on a regular basis to help meet the annual needs of the utility, plus the elimination of using the system development charges to pay debt service, adding in then the new debt service requirements, and the system reinvestment funding policy requires about a 28.5% increase in 2011, 2 years of 26.5%, followed by 2 years of 11% increases over the study period. Again, as with water, this rate strategy does also include the continued use of cash reserves over this study period to help smooth this rate increase strategy to as low as we could get it here. Then again, same chart looking at the strategy for the top dotted line being going from today's revenues up to, by the end of the study period, fully funding the total sewer utility obligations. Again, these are just a sampling of looking at your current chart, your current rates on the left, and what they would look like over the next 3 years with the across-the-board increases for the system-wide revenue needs. Finally, looking at the stormwater utility revenue requirements, again, a series of capital projects kind of around the $400,000 mark,